Nobody in Millhaven Creek forgot the night. Elias Vance opened his door to a woman who had nothing left to lose, and somehow, without trying, gave him back everything he had stopped believing in. It wasn't what she said. She said very little that first night. It wasn't even the way she looked, standing on his porch in the rain with one bag and the kind of silence that comes after something has already broken. It was the way she thanked him, quietly, without debt in her eyes. Like she was used to surviving on very little and had learned to mean what she said because she couldn't afford to waste words. He thought about that for a long time afterward, longer than made sense for a man who had let someone use his guest room for one night out of nothing more than basic human decency. Elias Vance was 53 years old and had been alone for 11 of them. Not unhappily, he would have told you. And he would have believed it when he said it. He had a cabinet shop at the edge of town that kept him busy in the way physical work keeps a man from thinking too much. He had a dog named Carpenter who was getting old. He had a house with 4 rooms, 3 of which he rarely entered. He had built his life the way he built furniture. Carefully, precisely, with no unnecessary pieces. He was not a man people described as lonely. They described him as self-contained. There is a difference, and Elias understood it better than most, because he was the one who had decided which word applied. The storm came on a Tuesday in late September, the kind that moves in from the north without warning and turns a cool evening into something genuinely dangerous by nightfall. Elias was closing up the shop when he saw her. She was standing at the edge of the road under the narrow overhang of the old Kellerman building, which had been empty for 2 years and offered about 4 inches of protection from the rain. She had a dark coat that was soaked through and a canvas bag held tight to her chest like it contained something fragile. She wasn't looking for help. That was the thing he noticed first. She wasn't scanning the street with desperate eyes or approaching anyone. She was simply standing in the least bad position available to her and waiting for something to change. Elias locked the shop door. He stood under his own overhang for a moment. The rain showed no sign of negotiating. He walked across the road. "You have somewhere to be tonight?" he asked. She looked at him with the measured calm of someone who had learned to assess strangers quickly and accurately. "Not tonight," she said. He nodded. "There's a guest room, one night. No obligation." She studied him for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then she said, "All right," not gratefully, not suspiciously, just plainly, like a woman making a reasonable decision in a difficult situation. Her name was Nora Ashwell. She told him that over the cup of tea he made, because it seemed like the right thing to do, and not because he was trying to extend the evening. She was 46. She had come up from the south following a job that had fallen through before she arrived. She said it without drama, the way people describe weather they've already survived. He didn't ask anything else. She didn't offer anything else. He showed her the guest room, pointed out the extra blankets, and said good night. That was all it was supposed to be. In the morning, she was up before him. He came downstairs to find his kitchen smelling of coffee, and Nora Ashwell standing at the window with a cup in both hands, watching the wet road dry in the early light. She had made enough for 2 without asking. She turned when she heard him and nodded toward the pot with a look that said, "This is not a gesture, it's just coffee." He sat down. She sat across from him. They drank in silence for a while. Outside, a truck moved slowly through the leftover puddles. Carpenter came in from the back room, regarded Nora with the cautious dignity of an old dog, and settled near her feet. Elias noted that. Carpenter did not do that with people he didn't know. "The storm's passed," he said. "Eventually." "Yes," she said. "You have a plan for today?" She wrapped both hands tighter around her cup. "I'll figure something out." He looked at her. Not with pity. Pity would have sent her out the door faster than the rain had brought her in. He looked at her the way he looked at a piece of wood he was trying to understand. With attention, without pressure. "There's a woman on the main road who runs a boarding house," he said. "Reasonable rates. I can give you her name. That would help," Nora said. She didn't thank him excessively. She didn't make him feel like a rescuer. She just received the information the way she had received the guest room, with a quiet dignity that cost her nothing and somehow meant everything. She stayed at Clara Webb's boarding house for 2 weeks before finding work at the feed and supply on the east end of town. Elias knew this the way you know things in a small place, without asking, without meaning to, through the ordinary channels of a town that shares its information freely. He didn't seek her out, but Millhaven Creek was not a large town, and a man who walked his old dog each evening, and a woman who walked because she didn't own a car were eventually going to end up on the same stretch of road. It happened on a Wednesday. She was ahead of him by half a block, walking with the same unhurried purposefulness she seemed to bring to everything. Carpenter saw her first and pulled toward her with a determination that surprised Elias. She stopped when she heard the dog and turned, and something in her face changed. Not dramatically, just a small opening, like a room with better light than you expected. "Your dog remembers me," she said. "He has opinions about people," Elias said. "He's usually right." She crouched down and let Carpenter put his gray muzzle into her hands. She spoke to him quietly. Something Elias couldn't hear, and the old dog leaned into her like he was coming home. Elias stood there and felt something move in his chest that he hadn't felt move in a very long time. They walked together that evening without deciding to. The conversation moved slowly, the way conversations do between people who are more accustomed to silence than noise. She asked him about the cabinet work. He told her more than he expected to. She listened with the focus of someone who was actually interested, not performing interest. He asked her about the South. She gave him pieces. A town smaller than this one, a business that had failed, a house she had sold to cover what the business left behind. She said it without bitterness, which somehow made it worse and also better. "You had to start over," he said. "I had to start," she said. "The over part is the easy part." He thought about that the rest of the way home. October came. The evenings shortened. The walks continued. He didn't name what was happening. He was not a man who named things before he understood them. But he noticed the way Tuesday evenings had started to feel different from the other evenings. He noticed that he had started making 2 cups of coffee on the mornings after their walks before remembering she wasn't there. He noticed that Carpenter watched the door in the evenings with more attention than he used to. Nora was careful with him. That was the word for it. Not cold, not distant, but careful. Like someone who had learned that things could be taken away without warning and had adjusted her habits accordingly. He understood that. He had his own version of it. In November, she told him about her daughter, who was grown now and living far west with her own family. The distance between them was not a wound exactly, more like a scar, present but settled. "We talk," she said. "It's enough. It wasn't always, but it is now." He told her about the 11 years, not as a complaint, just as a fact that deserved to be said aloud to someone who would receive it correctly. She received it correctly. She didn't try to reframe it or comfort it or tell him the years hadn't been wasted. She just nodded, like someone acknowledging the weight of a thing without adding to it. "You built a good life in them," she said. "I did," he said. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a consolation. It was December when she came by the shop, not to the house. To the shop during working hours, which was different. She stood in the doorway with her coat on and a look on her face that was slightly less careful than usual. "I have a question," she said. He set down his tools. "All right, Clara's raising the rates in January. I've been looking at other options." She paused. "There's a small apartment above the hardware store that's opening up. It's decent. I can afford it." Another pause. "I'm going to take it." He waited. He understood there was more. "I wanted you to know before I moved," she said, "because you were the first person in this town who was decent to me, and I didn't want to just disappear." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'm glad you told me," he said. She nodded. She started to turn Nora. She stopped. He was not a man who said things easily. He knew that about himself. He had let 11 years pass because the alternative required saying something, and saying things meant risking something, and he had become very practiced at calculating whether a risk was worth it and deciding, always, that it wasn't. "I'd like the walks to continue," he said. "After you move, if you want them to." She turned back. She looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. Something careful becoming something else. Something like relief. "I'd like that too," she said. Spring arrived the way it always does, with more confidence than the weeks before it deserved. They were not in a hurry. Neither of them had anything to prove to a timeline. They moved toward each other the way people do, when they have learned from the places where they moved too fast before. With attention, with steadiness. With the particular patience of those who understand that some things are worth building correctly. He asked her in April, not grandly. They were sitting on his porch after Sunday supper, which had become a weekly arrangement sometime in February, without either of them formally proposing it. "I've been thinking," he said. She smiled without looking at him. "You're always thinking." "I'd like this to be what we do," he said. "The suppers and the walks and all of it. Permanently. I'd like you to be here." The evening was quiet around them. In the distance, the last birds were settling. Nora was still for a long moment. Then she turned and looked at him with those steady, experienced eyes, and he saw it, the decision moving across her face like light moving across water. "Yes," she said simply, directly, like a woman who had stopped saying things she didn't mean and had no intention of starting again. He reached over and took her hand. She let him. Carpenter, asleep at their feet, shifted and sighed with the deep satisfaction of an old dog whose instincts had once again been proven correct. They married in June. Small, uncomplicated, the way both of them wanted it. Clara Webb brought flowers. The man from the hardware store shook Elias's hand for a long time without saying anything, which was the right thing to do. Nora's daughter came from the west and stood in the back with her own quiet eyes. Watching her mother hold the hand of a man who looked at her like she was something he had not known he was waiting for, the cabinet shop stayed. The apartment above the hardware store was let to a young schoolteacher who needed it more. Nora found her way into the work eventually, helping with the books and the ordering, and after a while, the finishing work, which she had more patience for than Elias and considerably better hands. The 4 rooms stopped feeling empty. Carpenter lived another year and a half, long enough to sleep in every room of a house that finally had people in all of them. He went quietly one morning, in autumn, on the rug by the back door, and they buried him under the oak at the edge of the property. Nora cried. Elias held her. He thought, not for the first time, that this was what he had not known he was missing. Not the absence of loss, but someone to carry it with. 3 years after a stormy Tuesday night and a cup of coffee made for 2 without asking, Elias Vance stood in his workshop and looked at what he was building. It was a crib. Small, careful, precise. Every joint fitted, every surface smooth. Built for a grandchild Nora's daughter was expecting in the spring. He stood back and looked at it for a long time. Then he heard Nora in the kitchen, moving around in the easy way she moved around in spaces that belonged to her now. And he thought about a woman standing in the rain with a bag held tight to her chest, waiting for something to change. He hadn't saved her. He understood that now. She had been surviving before he opened the door, and she would have survived after, because that was the kind of person she was. What he had done was simply leave the door open long enough, and she had walked in, and stayed. And in doing so, without trying, without announcing it, had walked into every empty room in a life that had been very carefully built around the absence of exactly that. He went inside. She looked up. She handed him his coffee. And Elias Vance, who had spent 11 years being self-contained, sat down at his own kitchen table and felt, fully and without reservation, at home. If slow-burn stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary things in quiet lives are what you come back for, there are more waiting for you right here and before you go. This story has traveled through a screen into your world. We'd genuinely love to know where in the world that is. Drop your location in the comments. It means more than you know to see how far a simple story can reach. This channel grows the way good things grow.